Welcome, Gothamites, to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, the psychologist of the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City. And for one last time, a galaxy far, far away. It's Dr. Drea Letamendi. Hello, Drea.
Hi, Brian. Is it one last time?
Well, it's one last time until our patrons tell us we can cover something else. But we are covering the final of 9 movies so far. So unless you want to go back and do the Ewok Adventure or Caravan of Courage or Battle for Endor.
Wow, those are your choices.
I that's how many movies exist. So
that's right. We were sticking to the Star Wars cinematic universe. Mm-hmm. It's been a delight. I'm a little sad that this is our last episode covering Star Wars, at least for now.
I don't know that I'm sad. I might be a little sad. I mean, it's been fun talking about these movies. I think there's a little bit of a stigma with this particular movie. And so it's like, oh, we're closing out on Rise of Skywalker. It's funny because it's so divisive. People who loved Last Jedi tend to dislike Rise of Skywalker. And then the people who hated Last Jedi tend to love Rise of Skywalker. I'm sort of in the middle. I don't really care one way or another. To me that they all work. But how did you feel about Rise of Skywalker?
It's really interesting because I have only seen this movie maybe twice. This is maybe the third time I've seen it.
Yeah, I
it's
think that's
not
right.
My favorite.
Yeah.
Of all the Star Wars films, but it this time around, I will say I did tear up twice, and I will share what those 2 moments are.
Okay.
I'd say less than a minute of pure kind of like nostalgic, delightful feelings, emotional feelings, deeply moved by a particular narrative or line that was said. And yet the other 2 hours of the movie just didn't seem to
click.
It didn't stand out. It didn't have that meaning for me. I do remember seeing this in the film and I do remember seeing this film in the theater, and this was at the end of 2019. So this was just on the brink, just before the COVID-19 global crisis.
Yeah.
And so I do recall some memory of seeing this in the theater. This was the last film I saw in the theater, maybe before all that stuff happened with COVID. I also remember getting up in the middle of the movie because it was so long and I had so much to drink that I needed to run to the restroom. And I got yelled at by somebody on the end of the aisle. So
for getting up. And
it was when they're on that, they're retrieving the holocron.
Yeah.
So it's about 2/3 of the way into the movie.
That's the one on the forest moon, the indoor, where the Death Star has crashed into the ocean. Yeah.
And I tried to wait until it was a moment where I thought, okay, I can probably quickly get through, walk past a few people, crouch down, try to be as discreet as possible, get to the end of the aisle, rush to the restroom.
But to be fair, we have a tendency to see the movies in very large theaters, and we usually sit in the dead center. So when you say very few people, you're talking about half the...
I don't regret it, but I had biological needs. But I was yelled at both times when I left the aisle and then when I came back.
Wow.
So...
You just point those folks out to me next time.
I will.
All right.
Was this the movie I also lost my 3D glasses? I think it was.
Yeah, this is the movie you missed.
Oh my gosh, it totally is. So around that time, I think it was because I got up, I lost my 3D glasses. Yeah. And so I saw about 1/3 of the movie without the 3D glasses. And these are necessary. Like this is not like, oh, you'll just make it through. I saw the rest of the film pretty much not seeing what was happening.
I will correct you on that.
No?
You lost your 3D glasses and I gave you mine. I watched the last third of the movie not in 3D.
I I feel like I watched a good portion and then told you what happened. Did you really see most of this? Well,
I saw the last third of it. You came back and you were like rummaging around looking for your glasses and couldn't find them. And then as the good, partner that I am,
That's so sweet of you.
Mine to you.
What kind of person am I that I forgot that little detail?
Well, you forget a lot of details.
Well, and I didn't want to because somebody may say, why didn't you just get up and get a new pair?
Again?
It's because I got yelled at. I was terrified. I didn't want to move.
Yeah.
Anyway, so thank you for that. So those are the things I remember about Rise of Skywalker.
Well, you remember what I remember about Rise of Skywalker is the opening crawl.
Yes, and that was amazing.
We should preface this conversation by saying that for many years, I knew everything about every movie coming out in theaters. I knew the release dates. When things changed, I knew all about that. I knew what the budget was. I knew who had gone over. I knew all the different
magazines. You had a prescription to all, a subscription to all the magazines that told you about films. What was that? It's like
everything. I had everything. I had Premiere. I had Entertainment Weekly. I had Starlog. I had everything. 3 years before a movie came out, I could tell you every little detail about it. But a few years ago, I decided I really hate knowing all that. And it took the enjoyment out of watching movies for me sometimes. And so luckily, I have a wife who's kind enough to go into my Twitter account or my social media account and mute words for me so that I didn't know. I did not know.
I tell you, I muted and hid everything about Palpatine. And it wasn't right away. It was about midway through the marketing for this film that he became known. It was revealed, I think, in a trailer where his voice is heard.
And that just blows my mind. It blows my mind, A, that you would reveal it there. But it also blows my mind that people didn't just get up and revolt prior to going and seeing the movie or celebrate, whichever side of the camp you're on.
I think it was at first unclear how big of a role he would play. And it was everywhere. And so I ended up going onto your social media, of course, with your permission.
Yeah,
and muting out Emperor Palpatine, Sith Lord, villain, Star. I just went through Ian McDermott. I just went through and tried to make sure that you wouldn't. This would be a huge spoiler for you.
Yeah.
And I remember being in New York City. I think it was for
New York
Comic-Con. And we were walking through one of the big stores.
It was a Disney store.
And there were shirts that had Palpatine right in the center of the shirt. Huge, the whole profile display, and the Sith robe and everything. And
you wouldn't let me go into that corner.
I remember telling you, don't go in this store. Let's turn around.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm appreciative of that, but you have no idea what it's like until you're sitting there and the opening crawl begins and the very first line is like, Palpatine has returned or something along those lines. And I'm audibly in the theater. If people yelled at you for getting up to go to the bathroom, imagine how they felt when the very first thing you see is like, Palpatine is returned, and you can hear me go, I'm sorry, what? Just audibly in a theater. I couldn't control myself. I'm sorry, what? How did this happen? And why? This is a perfect place to begin our conversation, Drea, because why would this decision be made off screen? Why would this plot point be made off screen? Why are we? It's almost as if JJ and company went, oh God, Rian Johnson he didn't lay any foundation for Palpatine showing up in the second movie. So, we gotta just put it in the crawl. I do not understand how a reveal like that takes place in yellow letters on a starfield.
Honestly, I think that the reveal, Brian, happened in trailers and in the marketing for this film, that's when people started to grow in their minds the concept that the villain of the third film of the sequels were Palpatines, which we'll get into.
Yeah.
But it, for most people, was not a surprise. I do understand, though, what you're saying, I think, which is the concept of like, this was never leading up. There was never an indication that, that this is where it was going, you know? And I feel like this is the problem with the current iteration of Star Wars, is there's too much listening to everyone else. There isn't enough focus on simply creating a good trilogy of stories. Unlike, say, the first few phases of Disney's other juggernaut, Kevin Feige and the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where clearly they were leading up to Infinity War. And you could see where there was a lot of very intentional thinking about where this story was going to go. None of that, I feel like, was done for this trilogy. The sloppiness and the lack of cohesion is very clear in this film.
Yeah.
As a standalone film, it works ever so slightly just on its own.
Yeah.
But in its placement in the trilogy, it does seem very, very sloppily put together, haphazard. It just doesn't seem to fit.
It's like, oh, we got to quickly end this. Oh, there's only 3 movies. It turns out we're already at the 3rd one. We really need to wrap this up.
I mean, my sense of it is that they were looking for a way to explain Rey's origins. That up till the end of the 2nd movie, the entire narrative had been about her being a nobody. And we don't mean that in the sense of like she's lacking value or there's a worthlessness about her, but that she wasn't tied to the Skywalkers or any known legacy, that her ancestry was pretty mysterious, and in a way that made her more interesting, in a way that made her more relatable, that you can be a scavenger on Jakku and find that you have these amazing strengths.
Yeah.
And this is her story. I feel as though of the 2 films we're covering, well, these last 2, The Last Jedi had more of a meaningful, cohesive story. This is, let's just tie this all in to the Skywalkers and make this work for the original story. It kind of takes away from Rey's story.
There's too many people who shackle themselves to things that creators have said in the past, like the fact that George Lucas made a big point about the prequels being poetic, being, it's poetry with the first trilogy. That's why you start to get underscores of this sort of thing and that sort of thing. It's all poetry. And so I feel like JJ and company felt the need to do poetry again. And we have friends who love this 3rd movie because of the symmetry where it all comes down to Skywalkers and Palpatines. And that's the thing I hate about this movie, the fact that it comes down to Skywalkers and Palpatines. I really don't need a Skywalker and I really don't need a Palpatine at this point. I am happy with Rey and Rey doing what she can to further the cause of the rebellion. I don't need it to boil down to these 2 names again.
Right. It took away from the special aspects of these new characters, these young adventurers that we were getting close to. Of course, Rey, Finn, Poe, and Rose, which was like pretty much absent in this 3rd film.
Because they have to wrap up all the story in one movie, they literally stop all character development for any of those.
It really just is about Rey and Kylo Ren / Ben Solo. And you need the whole movie to kind of get through their development and the way that both of them shift a little bit in their psychological framework. But you're right. This was supposed to be about gaining a connection and some sort of new narrative with these newer characters. And I also feel like they blocked any opportunity to continue storytelling with these characters. Yeah. It was like, this is all you need to know about them. It didn't leave you with anything even the side characters with Lando coming back, and the what is Zori, the character that they kind of shoehorned in as a historical love interest for Poe.
Yeah.
It doesn't leave you with like, okay, yeah, I want more of this.
You know what I think it was designed to do, though? And I was noticing it more and more in this movie. And retroactively, you could say the same thing about all three of these films. I felt like this entire trilogy was made as a very thin trailer for all of the extended universe stuff. So, and even when you and I watched this movie, I kept saying, oh, there's a book about this, I'm sure. Oh, there's a book about this, I'm sure. They expected you in the same way to find out that Palpatine somewhere in between movies is coming back. I guarantee there's a book about that somewhere. Then want to learn about Poe's relationship with her? Go read that book or that comic book series. Oh, you want to see this character and what they're referring to? Go read that comic book series. Oh, the characters who are all former stormtroopers that are now living as sort of raiders on the forest moon, and they ride the horses that aren't horses. Want to know their story? Go read that comic book. I feel like so much of this was, let's give them just enough. Because even at the end, Lando and her name, I don't know what it is because she's not given any valuable screen time. He even says, where are you from? She's like, I don't really know. And he's like, well, let's go find out. Read the comic book.
Yeah, there's definitely some kind of spin-off story there.
The entire trilogy seems to allude to a bunch of outside things that you can go buy and read, and I just couldn't with them. Like it's like the movies.
Yeah, you wanted it to be somewhat contained, and tell its own story, fit with the other two films.
Yeah.
In the trilogy. And, I agree with you, but what I think really is the point of this movie is to wrap up the development of Rey and Kylo Ren. And not only to wrap that up, but to really kind of close that story out, like in the sense that this is really all you're going to get from these characters. And I'm not sure. I just, it falls flat. At the time, it barely worked. And now after years and years, the ride has come out, the comics have come out, the side stories, like it just, when you go back to this film, some of it is fun. Some of it is super atmospheric and interesting. Mm-hmm. Some of the new planets that we learn about are cool. Like The Last Jedi, the landscapes, the visual effects are pretty amazing. It's a great film. Mm-hmm. But story-wise, it, much like The Last Jedi, it kind of dismantled what happened in the movie before, told its own new story, and then tried to piece everything together. And I feel like the only way that maybe the writers thought this would make sense is to make it connect to those old, I don't mean old like age, but those nostalgic characters, those families, the ancestry, the heritage that we are used to. And that will somehow bring us the superficial feeling of closure.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's our analysis right there, everybody.
Yeah. Well, I do like how this film starts out. It opens with Kylo Ren essentially in battle. He's looking for the holocron.
He's now no longer in the first couple of movies, he was either incompetent, which I don't think is necessarily the case, or he was being held back from his true potential. Mm-hmm. And now that he is the supreme leader, he is running around the woods, killing people like a badass. And suddenly he is a scary character. He's in the dark, being lit by the glow of his lightsaber, the snow or ash that's in the air. He's just taking out
it's
person
almost,
after person.
It's like with his ascension, with the death of Snoke, with the what seems like demotion of Hux, there's this liberation that he has. And then you're right. It seems like his maybe his access to this confidence, these strengths, this ability to be pretty brutal, and he's fixed on finding the holocron.
It's an obsession at this point.
Well, I didn't. It almost changed. Like in the beginning, it seemed like he wanted it to find Palpatine, unsure if he was looking for Palpatine to destroy him or to join him, or to be curious about who he is.
You mean until he's actually talking to Palpatine?
Yeah. And I know we have a clip where we realize Palpatine is now speaking to him in his mind. So these are the thoughts that Kylo Ren has in his mind. These are essentially intrusions.
Yeah. Let's take a listen.
I have been every voice you have ever heard inside your head.
So now we've learned that.
Okay, so do you believe this?
Yes.
You believe it. You believe that
100%.
Well, we know what I do believe is that Snoke was just a being that Palpatine created, or even like grew in a lab.
But even Snoke was the one. He was saying that Snoke was the one that was linking Rey and Kylo Ren together so that they could communicate. So Snoke was manipulating that relationship. And now Palpatine is saying, well, I was manipulating that relationship. I created Snoke. I created...
Yeah, like that was me the whole time. It wasn't even Snoke.
And the obsession that you've had with Vader, the fact that you feel like you've been speaking to your grandfather. You haven't. You've been talking to me. You know, like all of that is basically what he's saying there.
A part of me is willing to believe that this is a manipulative tactic.
But then where would those voices have come from? Like, I don't feel like he's manipulating him here. I feel like he's been manipulating him his whole life. But at this point, he is fully pulling back the curtain. He is saying, this is what I've been doing.
I suppose in the way that when I say he's manipulating him, I sort of mean that he's able to get inside his head, but that he's sort of claiming control and power over all of his thoughts around the Force and his legacy. Because later we find out that he and Rey are a dyad. They're like a Force dyad. And they may have already had this inherent ability to link up.
Well, let's talk about that.
Okay.
Because they keep trying to put them into a relationship together. But as we've learned from... basically, if my understanding is correct, Anakin was a virgin birth.
Huh?
Or at least virgin conception, or at least if not virgin birth, his mother didn't. There was no father present. The midichlorians came in, they did their thing. She suddenly was with child. We've established that to be true. There was no father.
Well, that Palpatine. Do you know that story, right?
So tell me about the off-screen. Tell me about the book. No, but what I'm saying is he manipulated the Force to make this happen, correct?
Who?
Palpatine.
Oh, to make Anakin
happen.
Yes, that you're right. That is the myth.
That makes Anakin a product of Palpatine.
Yes.
Rey is also a product of Palpatine. Right? Like he refers to himself as her grandfather. Doesn't that make Ben and Rey like step grandkids to some, because Anakin then sired Luke and Leia. Leia then was the mother to Ben. So now Palpatine is sort of the great grandfather of Ben as well as the grandfather of Rey. And now they're smooching, and we know where their dyad comes from, right? It's because they're both family. We have siblings basically kissing again, just like we did in the first trilogy. You know why? Because poetry, Drea, poetry.
I see it a little bit differently. I don't see Ben as like a descendant, like a Palpatine descendant.
But he has to be.
I see him more. It's almost like, are we talking literal biological descendant, which I'm unsure of.
Well, how is he the biological grandfather of Rey? That would imply that one of his kids was one of his parent or one of her parents.
Yeah.
And they weren't. He just manipulated them.
This is almost in the realm of the cloning aspects of this too, the themes around cloning, where something that I've really wanted to ask you about, and I promise I'm not trying to avoid the issue you're bringing up.
Sure. But I do a lot of cloning in my free time, so I'm an expert here. Go ahead.
Well, no, my understanding of this Palpatine, and we're jumping all over the place, but I think really
so does the movie.
We're trying to understand who this Palpatine is.
Uh-huh.
We hear his voice. He's talking to Kylo Ren through the Force. Mm-hmm. He has been...
I think at this point, he's talking to him I think at this point in the room, he's just talking to him.
Well, he's been talking to him through the Force.
Yes.
He's been gradually getting into his head from a literal and psychological perspective.
Yes.
And we realize that Palpatine has been living on Exegol, which is this
like a Sith
planet that's so remote, so kind of like unknown in this region that's less traveled, and everyone seems to identify it. Everyone seems to recognize, like, oh yeah, that must be the Sith planet where the Sith fleet is, and the disciples are, and Palpatine must be there. And what I have wanted to ask you is that meant to be, when we finally come face to face with the Palpatine, mm-hmm. is that a clone of the Palpatine who died mm-hmm. down the in episode 6?
Or is he the genetic material that has been creating the other clones?
He's just a clone, which we know from the prequels was a science that was fairly well mastered, and if he wanted to, he could have had all these clones anyway. Mm-hmm. Or is the one who fell down the shaft in the Death Star, in the second Death Star in Return of the Jedi, a clone? And this is the original Palpatine, and he's been surviving all these years, which is why he's attached to essentially this sort of like big
robo arm.
It's almost like this mechanism, this huge arm that comes down and supplies him of all the biological material he needs to be able. He's hooked up to something. He's mm-hmm. like on life support. Mm-hmm. What is your understanding of this? Or is he just one of the clones?
Go read that comic book. I have no idea. That's what I'm saying. This movie does not tell you.
And maybe this movie doesn't care.
I don't think it cares. I think they're like, we'll fill in that hole with some series. We'll fill in that hole with some book or comic.
So this is where I'm going with that. This film needed to have Palpatine as the villain. Absolutely needed it. Did not want anything else. They were fixated on him being the villain. So therefore, we must figure out the side plot here is that he's a clone. Now, taking this back to how Anakin was essentially created, is there something around Palpatine's ability to grow this kid from whatever midichlorian and genetic material that he was able to secure? Does that necessarily...
Anakin?
Yes.
He didn't... I mean, he grew Anakin in the womb of...
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have to be a descendant of Palpatine. He could simply be.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But that's what I'm saying. That's the same thing with Rey.
Yeah.
Like, he's not her grandfather.
I thought he was.
Literally?
Yeah.
One of those kids was his kid?
I thought he was. Yes.
Who?
The two like unknown parents that continue to be mysterious.
This is probably in the movie and I probably glazed over it. Who is his kid? He's got a kid?
Yeah, one of the two parents that says bye to Rey. They're forced to give her away.
Yeah,
she gets essentially the revision here. And I'm trying to make it as cohesive as possible, coherent as possible.
Yeah,
she is given to somebody to take over to Jakku and hide on Jakku because her parents knew that she was being sought after, that Palpatine was looking for her because she was a descendant of his.
Well, we know that the ship that they get on was it Ocho's ship or whatever. We know that that's the ship that she watched fly away with her parents, and that it was meant to bring her to Palpatine. Like that's what they've uncovered, right. That it was meant to have a little girl on it that was going to Palpatine. And so Palpatine was going to start from the very beginning, as she was a child, raising her to be the next empress. But I didn't hear anywhere in there, and I am willing to admit that I am wrong on this. I did not hear anywhere where they were like, oh, that's Palpatine's son, or that's Palpatine's daughter, and her husband.
Oh, so your understanding is that they were adoptive parents?
No.
Oh.
No, my understanding was that it was very similar to the Anakin situation.
Oh, okay.
But I could be wrong about that. I guess what I'm saying is I don't see Palpatine getting down, right? Even when he's a senator, I don't see him with a family.
Yeah.
We never did. There was never any understanding that he had a wife and children.
Well, he had a double life. So when he was on the Senate, he was living this like public life.
But we never saw them. That's what I'm saying.
I'm saying it's possible.
Yeah. Well, sure. But it's also possible that, but regardless, if he is manipulating midichlorians and he is like taking some of his own life in order to give life to another thing, that's still a part of him, in some way, shape, or form. The genetic material of his makeup, of his composition, helped create Anakin.
And this is why I'm definitely aligning with you in some way that the two of them are destined to be bonded.
Correct. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Yes. And not in a way that because of like that concept I mentioned earlier of Romeo and Juliet as a story, that they're simply from different sides of this war, but that they have an inherent, almost like intrinsic attraction to one another. From the psychological perspective, I will say each of them, Ben Solo and Rey, they have very unique experiences. They feel like no one understands them. They feel like no one truly sees and hears them. They do not feel this sense of like human recognition. They just don't feel like they belong. And when they meet and when they have those moments of speaking with one another through the channel of the Force, that seems to be a sense of knowing. I get you. I'm in a different way, but I get you. I also struggle internally. I have this conflict, this light side, dark side conflict. Mm-hmm. I also have this general disdain and frustration with the generations before us that have put us in this place. So there's a shared emotion. Now they have different goals. And in the beginning of this film, he's in the search for Exegol for one reason. And Rey also finds herself in the search for Exegol because she wants to, quote, finish what Luke started. She realizes Luke had been seeking the holocron wanted to go to Exegol to finish. Luke knew.
Yeah.
So Luke knew. Not
only did Luke know.
Palpatine was on Exegol.
Not only did Luke know, Luke then decided to give up.
Yeah. Speaking
of Luke, by the way, and this is something that I meant to bring up in the last episode about sort of why I liked him so much. But there's an important quote from Yoda in one of the movies, which is actually let me find it here. I do not have a clip of it, but the quote is, "Once you start down the path of the dark side, forever will it dominate your destiny." Keep in mind the wording of that statement. Once you start down the path of the dark side, forever will it dominate your destiny. And I believe that Luke did, in fact, start down the path of the dark side. I believe the more we started to see him with black clothing and the black leather glove and the hubris that we've talked about in previous episodes, I believe he began accidentally down a path that he didn't realize was heading toward the dark side. Forever will it dominate your destiny. I do believe he struggled with it for the rest of his life. He did not simply revert and go pure. He struggled with it for the rest of his life. And it wasn't until he sacrificed himself that he freed himself of that darkness and simply became a pure Jedi. And that's why he catches the lightsaber and makes a joke about how you should respect this more, because when he was old and bitter, he was still wrestling with that within himself, and was certainly wrestling with what it meant to be a Skywalker and what that ultimately meant for Ben. And it terrified him. And fear, as Yoda has said in the Phantom Menace, fear ultimately ends up leading you to the dark side. And once he is a Force ghost, he is now wiser than he ever was when he was alive. He is now calmer. He's making jokes. Like, when was the last time you heard Luke really make a joke?
Yeah.
Like
he has a sense of balance and wisdom and patience.
Yeah.
And these are the things that he was trying to teach Rey. But when we think of The Last Jedi, especially when she's on the island of Ahch-To, and he's very reactive. He's very avoidant. He's very fearful. He still has a lot of fear. And I agree, to see him as a Force ghost and be able to find and achieve that sense of self-balance, and to not like, I guess the words I'm looking for are that he's not sinking into the dark side. It's not dread. It's not fear. It's not anxiety. Those things can still exist, but he finds a way to have it be present and not identify with it, not define himself by that. Because that's the whole point of this. The entirety of what Yoda's saying is, once you become aligned with those feelings, and I actually really agree with this part of it, once you find yourself aligning with those negative emotions, you cannot separate yourself from them. You are the anger, you are the rage, you are the frustration, you are the dread. Then it's very true. It's so difficult to get out of the cognitive, emotional, and behavioral remnants of that, how it's intermingled with your psychology. Where I disagree with Yoda, and I rarely would want to. I mean, who's going to disagree with Yoda? I feel like it's sacrilegious or something. Where I disagree with it, and maybe it's not so much a disagreement, but it's a sense of understanding that you do not have to eliminate or void yourself of those experiences. You witness, observe, and have an acceptance. So that's the human form.
Sure.
And I think Jedi in some ways are saying that they transcend the human form. And I'm willing to understand that that's their belief. That's their culture.
Well, and we learn at the end of the movie that they have.
Well, heck, I mean, they're walking around as Force ghosts.
So have the Sith. Like the Sith.
Oh my gosh. So the Sith. So, for one, the Sith, we learned so much in this film. The Sith have this ability to clone themselves or whatever is happening with Palpatine. There's many, many Palpatines.
I think Palpatine is the one who has that ability. I don't think the Sith did it. I think you basically took the cloning technology and you perfected it to the point that Palpatine realizes he can basically live forever through this cloning technology.
Yeah.
And he's simply going to transfer his spirit from one body to the other. I mean, he comes right out and says to Rey, in fact, I have this quote here where he kind of explains his sinister plan. Let's take a quick listen here.
Your hatred, your anger. You want to kill me. That is what I want. Kill me, and my spirit will pass into you. As all the Sith live in me, you will be Empress. We will be one.
So he's saying, kill me, my spirit will pass into you, as all the Sith are inside of me. So they're all with me.
Okay.
And then once we have combined, you will become the Empress and we will all be within you, you know, all the Sith, in the same way that she's been begging since the beginning of the movie for all the Jedi to be with her.
Well, I suppose I'm confused at this idea or this new goal. Palpatine never came out with this plan. Like, his plan always was he wanted to rule the galaxy. And what do you make of this? Is this truly what he wants? He wants her to destroy him, and in some way he will be
Rule from
even more
inside
powerful.
her.
Like,
Yeah.
so is it like a ventriloquism zombie-ish thing?
I think it's as soon as you give yourself over to the Sith, we all become one. We all become united.
So he's willing to kind of let go of his current body or bodies and exist in spirit in Rey.
In Rey, a more powerful version of any of the previous subordinates he's ever had.
Okay.
It's very possible that Ben was originally recruited to be this character. And it's why he kept forcing these voices into Ben's head about fulfilling what your grandfather never could and being this and being that. And he comes right out and tells Ben, I guess at this point, Kylo Ren, he tells Kylo, you can finish where your grandfather failed and become the most powerful leader in the galaxy. And that's ultimately, he says, go kill the girl. And so that's where Ben is then sent off on the mission of finding Rey and killing her, when really what Palpatine wants is for Rey to come to Exegol so that she can become. Now, the question is he playing both sides? If it is, I don't think so, because Ben was right there. Like, Ben's there in the beginning. He could have just gone ahead and fulfilled the destiny.
So Ben has always been a tool.
Correct.
He's always been the figure that Palpatine needs to manipulate and use as somebody who would essentially get Rey onto the dark,
Back to
into
Exegol.
that realm.
Yes.
And then be able to, for Palpatine to be able to convince her.
Yeah.
So some of this is interesting because it's Ben who tells Rey about her history.
Yeah.
The way that we find out, and that's how we find out too, right? We find out when Ben essentially tells Rey, you're a Palpatine, your grandfather is Emperor Palpatine. That's your true origin. This is who you are meant to be.
Yes.
And when you heard that, did you feel like this was another one of those, like, I'm your father moments? in Star Wars. Like, here is a huge discovery that changes so much.
I felt like it was an erasure of the things you loved about Last Jedi. Mm-hmm. I felt like the fans basically complained really loudly about Rian Johnson's indication that Rey didn't come from anywhere important.
Oh, how dare he?
And they didn't think enough about, sort of the perspective that Rian Johnson had on that part of the movie, on that character. And in an effort to retcon it, they then made her a Palpatine. Where it's like, oh, what would be worse than Luke finding out Vader is his father? Well, what would be worse is for Rey to find out that Palpatine is her grandfather.
It's kind of the same drop.
And it's trite. It's such a trope that, it's funny because we were even told by a listener, and I apologize for not having this tweet or this email.
I think present. I have this one.
But it's someone saying I had not considered that approach and that it made her think differently. You have it up?
Well, I have one of the comments.
Okay.
This is from Reed_Anthony on Instagram, who tells us, I loved the episode. I thought you and Brian gave a great analysis of the movie. They go on to say, Brian's thoughts on how The Last Jedi and Empire Strikes Back mirror each other in the sense of, quote, what's the worst thing that could happen to the protagonist? It made me appreciate the film even more than I already did. Honestly, the entire episode elevated the whole movie for me.
I appreciate that. I can't take credit for it. Those were literally Rian Johnson's thoughts, as he explains in the commentary when he wrote the movie, was that this is the worst thing she could find out. And now I feel like...
this is the worst thing.
Exactly. Oh, you are important. Like, your parents are nobody, but you didn't ask about your grandfather. He's really important.
Yeah, you missed it by a generation. If you just went one back, you'd realize just how important you are.
They tried too hard to overcorrect.
Okay.
And then it just made the whole thing trite. It was like, oh, no, now we're just really back to... finding out the quote-unquote worst thing you could ever find out from Empire.
How powerful would it have been? And I even think it still would have worked if she had been still disconnected, a bit adrift from these legacy families. So, for instance, if we followed this film, if this film was exactly the same, except she's not a Palpatine, it could still work. Palpatine 100%. Could still seek her out and try to recruit her to the dark side because she has these inner strengths and powers that he wanted to harness.
Yeah, you're onto something. Like, you're 100% right. And the way that this would be considered poetry is the way that it mimics the fantasy of Star Wars, of the original movie, which people know as A New Hope. If you think of space wizards and space pirates and a damsel in distress and a black knight, keeping her locked away in a castle and all that stuff, think about all the times in those fantasies you've ever heard about a prophecy. Mm-hmm. And a young girl will rise up to vanquish evil, and whatever. All of that could have exactly mimicked the same thing where, you know what? You thought Skywalker was important? Skywalker really wasn't important either. Skywalker was a tool to ultimately get Rey to fulfill the prophecy. But no, that's not the way JJ and company went. It was still the need to keep it all within the families.
Well, and I realized why I was so hopeful about Rey not being linked to these legacy families. It's almost as if there's something that was, I would say a part of that fantasy storytelling that just became so curious and intriguing and delightful. Lord of the Rings is, I think, a well-told story about hobbits and dwarves and elves. Yes, many of them who come from lineage, many of them who have this important background, but some do not.
And the most important person in The Lord of the Rings isn't even Frodo. Like, Frodo is a legacy character who comes from Bilbo, but ultimately Samwise is the one who gets the ring up to Mount Doom. You know, like Frodo doesn't even throw it in. Spoiler alert for those of you who maybe don't know The Lord of the Rings. Frodo's not even the one that destroys the ring in the end. It happens by accident, but Sam is the one who got him there. And so if you think about it in the same way, there's really no reason why someone couldn't be seen as equally important, but not part of the legacy, or maybe even surpass those legacy characters. Like, it'll make you think about those legacy characters even more, because you then go, oh, Luke isn't the absolute hero that we all thought he was. Luke is fallible. Luke is incredibly important to the story and to the universe, but he's not the ultimate goodie. This other person is, and this person comes from no one. This person is basically a
from
scavenger
nowhere, nobody. That, and I think I said this. I've said this a lot. That had made Rey not only fascinating, but relatable and grounded and real. And then in this film, you see all of the things that she's doing. She is like force jumping into the air and attacking Kylo Ren's TIE fighter ship. Like, she's doing these acrobatic things. She's healing giant serpents by touching them on their wound. Like, suddenly we're realizing about force energy or life energy, the fact that you can essentially like swap your hit points and like
she's literally laying on hands.
Lay on hands.
She's literally laying on hands.
Yeah. And so you realize how powerful she is. But you don't, but now you sort of excuse it with like, well, it's not really Rey. It's this, it's the legacy. It's the force that it isn't even
in the same
part
way
of her repertoire.
In the same way that Palpatine can lay on hands onto Shmi.
Careful with your.
Well, I kept wanting to say Padme, but I was like, it's not Padme.
Yeah.
In the same way that that Palpatine lays on hands on Shmi and conceives the wunderkind that is Anakin Skywalker, she is able to do the exact same thing, except she's using it to heal this big serpentine creature underground. And this is sort of the James Bond of this particular movie, and it really annoyed me. In the same way that in a James Bond movie, Q will always give him just the gadgets that he'll need for that particular adventure, where there's like, it's like, oh, you need a belt that does this, or you need a watch that does this, or you'll need a car that does that. Bond will find a way to use each and every one of those things. And in this movie, it's not like we set up in, 2 movies ago that we could lay on hands. And that's going to become really important later when she revives Ben, and then when Ben then revives her. Now, that's just all stuff we learned earlier in this movie, and it conveniently comes back to be exactly what we need to win the day at the end of this film. They're not looking at each movie as a piece of a trilogy. They're really just looking at each movie individually and sort of figuring out ways to loosely connect them.
It's literal cinema Mad Libs.
Well, and you talk about literal cinematic Mad Libs. That's exactly how they wrote Princess Leia's character in this film. I mean, and I don't blame them for this. She had passed away.
Yeah.
But they took unused footage from Force Awakens, and they said, "Great, what does she say in these scenes?" Okay, let's write scenes around her dialogue, so that now it makes sense for Rey to say this or do this. And then they would have, if I remember correctly, Billy Lord was her stand-in, so that when they hug, Billy Lord's the one that's hugging Rey. And then you hear a line of dialogue that came from Force Awakens, but is now being used in this scene. That was their way of creating a character for Leia in between films, because she had passed away. But you talk about cinematic Mad Libs. That's literally what happened. And by the way, I applaud them for that.
I thought that worked for the most part. That didn't seem disjointed.
No.
That seemed to make sense. And I think you even said while we were watching the film, they kind of had to write the scenes after they figured out what they could do with her audio.
Let's take this audio, or let's take these scenes or this audio, and let's figure out how to then write a scene where these scenes and audio make sense.
Yeah, sort of like reverse engineering, which you, again, like you said, you sort of have to do that.
To me, it's better than Grand Moff Tarkin or young Leia in Rogue One. I feel like if they had gone that route, and I think that at that point with Rogue One and Tarkin having already been done and sort of criticized a lot, the last thing they were going to want to do was do that to cement Carrie Fisher's legacy in this franchise. And so I think it really was smart of them to go and look for footage that didn't need to be digitally manipulated too much to make work.
Yeah. Speaking of the passing of Carrie Fisher, as well as the passing of her character, General Leia, that was the first.
She'll always be royalty to me.
Of course, that was the first kind of teary-eyed moment I had. Was when Ben is on that Star Destroyer that's halfway in the water. He's just battled with Rey. She bests him. She takes off in his ship, and he is so conflicted at this moment. It's as if everything that he had his heart set on, all the things he had thought about himself, about Snoke, Palpatine, all of it is sort of coming to a point of internal destruction. None of it seems to make sense for him anymore. So his internal anxieties are surfacing, and he sees his father, Han Solo. Interestingly, he sees him how Harrison Ford looks like in 2019, essentially, or 2018 when they filmed this, maybe. So he's a little older than he's like at the age that he should have been.
He's basically the age he was when he died.
He seemed a little grayer and whiter in the hair, but that's just my projection.
Yeah, because he's white haired in Force Awakens.
So he sees him and
he's gruff. He's got the stubble.
Yeah, and it reminds me just how good Harrison Ford is as Han Solo. Just with a few lines there, being able to capture the essence of who that character is. And there's a gentle exchange. It's very gentle on Han Solo's side.
And it's a reprieve of his death scene.
Yes. So talk about balance, talk about poetry. I did like that scene. I felt like it was genuinely good.
A reprise, I should say. Yeah.
And so Ben faces the image of his father. And, for a moment, I think the audience is wondering, wait, how's this happening? He's not a Force ghost. So why and how is this happening? And it's explained that Ben is manifesting this conversation in his mind.
He comes right out and says, "You're a memory," and then Han says, "I'm your memory," or it's your memory. Like you're the one creating this. So this isn't someone coming at you. This is yourself coming at yourself. Yeah,
it's a very therapeutic conversation, and it's even something that you might do in therapy. Is if you would talk to somebody who's passed, what would you say? What would you hear them say to you?
Yeah.
And some of it is wishful. What would you like them to say to you? So what would you like to say to them that you didn't have the chance to say. And so it's super reparative. It has this moment of healing. It has this moment of trying to undo the harm that maybe they both contributed to.
And in this particular moment, Ben is literally he's going back and replaying the event that he feels like he did incorrectly the first time.
Yeah, what could he have done differently?
Yeah.
And he tells them the very same line, which is, I know what I have to do.
But I don't know if I have the strength to do it.
Exactly. Yeah. And with that gentle validation from his father, he manages to throw his lightsaber into the depths of the water. And at that moment, he's claiming or reclaiming Ben Solo. He's no longer pursuing the Sith life. He
says Ben Solo's dead, and, and then Han says, no, Kylo Ren is dead.
Yes.
But you can go back and then when you want to talk about reprising lines of dialogue and scenes and even the poetry, the fact that Ben says dad, he calls him dad, and struggles to say anything again, struggles to say anything. And then what's Han say? I know. Like, that Ben's trying to say, I love you. And then in classic Han form, he simply says, I know. Like that's a beautiful moment in itself as well. You don't have to say it. I'm already aware.
It tells us that bond was there.
Yeah.
Now it escaped them.
Yeah.
It destroyed them, or it was destroyed by them, rather. But it was there, and in a way, Ben finds from this memory of his parent, from his father, he finds that he's able to access the affirmation and love that he kept denying and avoiding, and even I would say sort of missed because of the way that he was raised. This goes to kind of what I would see as the umbrella theme with this third film, which is this is when intergenerational trauma becomes surfaced or emerges as the actual issue or conflict that needs to be resolved. Yes, there's Palpatine hooked up onto wires and this clone needs to be destroyed. Yes, the resistance is dwindling and they're fighting with their last few dozen or so fighters. Yes, the universe is at stake. But I think from the perspective of character development, this is where their intergenerational trauma is addressed. It's like, hey, we're the way that we are because of the things that came before us. Mm-hmm. And remember in the last movie, there was some dialogue around like, well, just let it burn. Yeah. Like just get rid, like just
kill the past.
Yeah. Just don't even try to heal that. Don't even try to understand it. Just burn it down. And here there's a more intentional perspective around how do you resolve it? How do you make it work? And I do appreciate that about this film. I don't know if we've talked about intergenerational trauma on the show a lot, but it is something that a lot of us still sit with and work through. It's one of the very common reasons people go to therapy. It's essentially the idea of like trauma being passed down to generations. Mm-hmm. And it's real, like real trauma, like people who there's a ton of studies that look at survivors of the Holocaust, survivors of incarceration, survivors of internment camps, and how huge communities have been put in, forced into experiences that are traumatic, and how their offspring are dealing with some of the impacts of that, the remnants of that. Yeah. And it manifests in a number of different ways. And a lot of times I think the question comes through around, can you can you even overcome that? Can you get past it? What are the things that you need to do to find healing from that, especially if the traumas that happened weren't even a part of your life? Like, they all happened before you were born. So I think some of this is like with Rey, all of the stuff that happened that were even some of the things we're presuming with the Palpatines, and even the things that happened when she was very little, she has no responsibility for. She's sort of dealing with that loneliness, abandonment, and lack of mentors because of the things that happened before her.
Yeah.
Ben Solo, like, we've been hard on Luke. We've been very critical about the way Luke has mentored, but I do give Luke some credit, and Luke himself has been through quite a lot when it comes to his upbringing and what he experienced, especially being pushed into this huge war and really not having an opportunity to kind of deal with his own. Like, he's definitely haunted by some of the things that he experienced and saw, and some of the things that came before him. And by starting up this academy and deciding to train the Padawans and have this, extremely elite Jedi school, his idea was to instill all of these different Jedi values and principles and practices, but he had not gone through the necessary recovery and the necessary healing processes that he needed based on what he had gone through. The stuff with his father, the stuff with the Emperor, like, just where did all of that go? How did he reconcile all of that?
Which is weird, because you would think at the end of Jedi, when suddenly 3 Force Ghosts showed up and one of them is his father, you would think from that point on, they would mend. They would, clearly he's got the ability to Force Ghost. Now let's hang out and talk. Let's get to know each other. Let's do all of this. But no, none of that ever happened. And we thought that kind of thing might happen. You can see Luke Skywalker with an inner peace at the end of Jedi when he's leaning up against the tree, and then all of a sudden all of his friends come and they grab him as he's looking at these 3 Force Ghosts, and they don't see the Force Ghosts, so they turn him around and bring him all back to the party. Like, you kind of get the sense that there's now a peace there. He's now seen Yoda and Obi-Wan and old Anakin there, and they're all smiling, and they're looking at each other, and they're all like, we did it. Like, you would think, okay, at this point, let the healing begin. Yeah. But and you're saying alone, that it may not have.
No, well, I see that, and I'd say that's not enough. From that moment on, there needs to be
sequel
some
books
repair.
That show the conversations between Luke and Anakin.
But he just becomes more fixated on the extremes, right? The way that he mentored Ben was, don't entertain those negative thoughts. Do not see the fuller parts of yourself. Stay within this very narrow concept of what it means to be a Jedi. And that type of teaching, that rigidity, that sort of like, cognitive, extreme, fixed type of thinking, and even some of that like emotional narrowness led him to kind of pass on the symptoms of traumatic responses. And that's what we see in Ben. And I think what's helpful about this film from the psychological perspective is that, yes, Rey has her journey, but Rey stays pretty consistent throughout. She never really truly entertains the dark side, whereas Ben has to go through a pretty significant evolution. He has to see value in himself beyond Snoke or Palpatine. He really kind of receives that respect from Rey. He sees that he can be appreciated and loved by somebody, not because he can be weaponized or he can be a tool, but just that he has this, on its own, he has this value. He has something that's worth it. He has worthiness, right? And that's where in real life we also see opportunities to change, especially past or especially in the way of overcoming intergenerational trauma.
I'm sitting here thinking about the Force Ghosts, and I know that at the end of Obi-Wan Kenobi, Obi-Wan says, "Oh, now you show up," and Qui-Gon's like, "Oh, I was always here. You just weren't ready to see me yet." Mm-hmm. Which I realize is sort of the you're meant to infer that you have to be emotionally and spiritually ready to receive the Force Ghost. I don't know that Luke was ever there, but like suddenly Obi-Wan showed up and had no problem like showing himself off to Luke. But it makes me wonder, because again, we should talk about just how little experience Luke Skywalker actually has with the Force. He has not been given the decades worth of training that most children eventually received under the tutelage of Yoda and Qui-Gon Jinn and Anakin Skywalker, or well, yeah, sure, because Anakin had Ahsoka as a Padawan, and Obi-Wan, and you know, all these great Jedi masters. And it makes me wonder, in Luke's school, why couldn't the Force Ghosts just be the professors, the tutors? Why couldn't they, if they have the ability to manifest themselves and show that, like, if they're able to have these conversations with one another, and we see that Luke has the ability to still even use the Force when he pulls up the X-Wing that has been sunk for decades on Acto, why couldn't they be professors at Luke's school for the midichlorian gifted?
Well, they are advisors to the professors. So they're like executive coaches. They shouldn't be directly teaching the disciples.
I still wouldn't let Luke be the teacher, given that,
I mean, that was the problem.
he was given 30 minutes of training.
Yeah.
You know,
this is these are the casualties of not working on your demons. Like, these are the casualties. The idea with this that I can support and understand is, if you're not repairing yourself, if you're not working on your own healing, you can definitely pass on those issues and those setbacks to the folks that look up to you, the folks that you're guiding, mentoring, looking after, right?
Mm-hmm. Just a question I had. I mean, there's a lot of Force Ghost action happening as all of these characters that we're all familiar with die. And you actually asked the question as we were watching, why didn't Leia become Force Ghost? And I think I do appreciate very much the fact that her body stayed intact until Ben was gone. Mm-hmm. You know, that
until Kylo Ren was gone.
Well, Ben died. Like Ben.
Oh, when
Ben died, she then disappeared too. And so I do appreciate that Mom stayed behind for as long as she needed to, for her son to eventually come back and do the right thing. And then she disappears. Like, that's a very powerful moment for me. And I'm glad that they didn't Force Ghost her, but yeah, similar to the way that Ben and Yoda and Obi-Wan, they just disappear when they die. She didn't. She stayed there, wrapped up.
And she died because she reached out to her son.
Yes.
With the last energy that she had. I guess there's some similar connection, this bond that she has, where of course she can sense that he's around.
Well, I think
there was the ability to even communicate with him.
Yeah, in the same way Vader could always sense when Luke was around, or Luke could always sense when Vader was on the ship next door or whatever. Yeah, you have to believe that as long as Ben was alive, some of her force was still here, and that's why she wasn't disappearing. But it's that transference
Yeah,
again.
that's the word I'm looking for, like the energy transference. And she gave up her life to give him almost a vision or access to what makes him Ben.
Yeah.
The ability to push away from Kylo Ren and make that difficult decision.
So we have to wrap up. I realize we've really only talked about Rey and Ben and Palpatine. Really, it's mostly
I do have
Rey and
questions
Palpatine.
for you about Palpatine, though.
Okay, but before we end, I do want to ask you about something.
Okay.
But go ahead and give me your Palpatine questions, since I feel like those are probably more accurate or more appropriate for what we're talking about right now.
Well, when Rey ends up on Exegol, Palpatine introduces her to crowds and crowds of what the captions were calling disciples.
You're starting this out like it's a trivia question.
No,
When she's on Exegol, he introduces her to disciples.
are these actual disciples?
No, I think that's
who are the hundreds, if not thousands, of people that suddenly
those are the former
appear?
Sith. Those are the former Sith. That is.
Are they Force ghosts?
So here's the problem with captioning, right? Is sometimes you just hand the file over to a caption house, and the caption house will take the script, or will take, if it's available or whatever, and they'll just create captions, and sometimes if there isn't a speaker denoted in the script or in the film itself, they'll just choose something like crowd, or disciples, whatever. And again, super fans, let me know if I'm wrong about this, but my understanding is that those are all of the Sith of the past. Suddenly she is surrounded by the ghosts of the Sith, because we're all going to be united in this moment.
So Plagueis is up in there somewhere.
Someone somewhere, like down to the very first of the Sith. They are in those stands somewhere, because we are all going to be united. We're all going to be one. They're all chanting.
And I hate to be so literal about this, but
they're definitely not disciples of Palpatine.
Yeah, no, but they could be disciples of Rey. Like those are her new disciples.
Well, but they're not alive.
Okay, that was the second part of my question. They're basically kind of like Sith Force ghosts.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because they just sort of show up. Like, I don't feel like all these people were just waiting in the wings for her to show up.
Like, they don't all live on Exegol.
And then they're all going to take their seats in this big arena.
Okay.
I think they're all dead.
So it's a bit of a spiritual transcending sort of scene.
Otherwise, they would all fight back. I mean, they would all jump in.
That's what I thought was going to happen. The other thing is related to this, which is at some point someone says, it's actually one of the resistance fighters. They're like, oh, he's like Palpatine has conjured the Sith fleet.
Yeah.
And then you see
Well, it's not the resistance fighter. It's one of the First Order officers.
Is it? Okay.
Who says these conjurers and magicians, basically, and then Richard E. Grant's character, whatever admiral or captain or whatever he is, he says, well, they just conjured us a fleet.
Okay, so the fleet, these Star Destroyers, just kind of ascend from the ground. So as I understand,
on Exegol, yeah.
These are ghost ships, and are they they're militarized, so are there people in those ships? The ships are firing on,
but they're all being
planets.
remote controlled. They're all remote controlled, because at the end they lose the signal that helps them do their thing, and that's when Richard E. Grant is like, well, change the signal to what's coming from it.
Okay.
We'll remote control them.
Okay, so no one's in these ships.
No one's in the ships, but more importantly, I think was the first question you had. I can only assume that these were literally just conjured through the Force. Like, these aren't ghost ships. These aren't former Star Destroyers that have now been like...
He's manifested them
He
out
has
of thin air.
manifested them.
Okay.
That's why they're all weaponized beyond any Star Destroyer ever had been in the past. They've all got sort of miniaturized Death Star technology with those big cannons. They're able to destroy Kajimi. they now don't have to be a gigantic ball in the sky to do all that. So you're now looking at, and as long as we kill Palpatine and as long as we destroy the radio technology that communicates to the ships, which is what Finn and Rose and them are trying to do when they're literally, and I kid you not, riding horses on top of the Star Destroyers. I do not know what the atmosphere on this planet is like, but it's very cloudy, lots of lightning, lots of storms, and they are just on top of these ships up in the upper atmosphere of this planet. It's so ridiculous. I just can't. I can't. But yes, my understanding is that he manifested these ships.
It's so different than when Luke falls down that shaft and he's like clinging to his life on that little
on the Bespin, the little antenna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reminds me how risky all those little moments were, and then here it's just total chaos.
Yeah. Yeah, you can do anything you want. I got to admit, like the closing scene with the space battle, let's remove the horses on top of the Star Destroyers. But I imagine that the concept art for this movie was incredible. You know, like there are moments and shots and scenes that are beautiful to look at. I just don't think they work in motion in a movie. And, you know, I loved seeing Palpatine use the Force lightning to just shoot straight up and then hit all the ships that weren't his, you know, like that. Those visuals are fantastic. I just don't understand them within the concept of the story. I don't understand Palpatine coming back. I don't understand any of that, except that I just believe, and I know there are people who are going to disagree with me, I just believe it's lazy writing.
Sure.
It is playing to the masses and to the lowest common denominator. And I'm not suggesting that you know, people who liked Palpatine being in the movie are the lowest common denominator, but it's such low-hanging fruit that it takes no thought really whatsoever to just be like, we cloned him. And that one might be the original because he's got the bony fingers and all that stuff. But you know what? It doesn't even really matter. Palpatine's back. Because you can't have Star Wars without Palpatine.
Well, and guess what? Chewie's dead. Oh, wait, no, he's
Chewie's
not.
dead.
He didn't die. 3PO's dead. Well, no, he was, his memory was fully restored.
Not fully. He missed the few days.
There's a little amnesic reactions.
Yeah, that's the thing, is they don't even know how to make you, because you're absolutely right. You're touching on something that is so problematic within this movie, and that's that JJ was so scared to do anything that lasted. You know, like, we're going to kill Han, but we're going to bring him back in the form of a memory. And that's going to be very important. And we're going to kill Ben, but then he's going to climb up, and it turned out he's, you know, well, we're basically going to kill him with a lightsaber, but then we're going to heal him, and then we're going to throw him off a cliff, but he's going to come back, and then Rey's going to die, but Ben's going to bring Rey back.
Yeah.
But then he's going to die.
Yeah. At the end, they pass around the life force or the force energy a couple of times, and it's a moment where you're not sure who's going to survive. You sort of hope they both survive. And he uses the last of his force energy to
and
save
ultimately
her.
the last of his mother's as well.
Yeah.
And that's why she disappears.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was as if JJ was just really scared about doing anything that was going to be too long lasting, you know, and killing Chewbacca, killing the last of them was never going to work. And even in a theater, I never thought Chewie was on that ship. You know, I just knew that they were going to Raiders of the Lost Ark, the whole thing with Marion having, they put the wrong basket in the truck that I just blew up.
Oh, right.
They must have switched baskets. Why would they do that, for starters? That doesn't make sense.
For Chewie in particular, I think it was to show Rey that there is a way that her power can can be more than who she is. Like she utilized her power. She essentially lost control.
Yeah. They're showing the same traits that like Luke found when he was himself impetuous and being led by anger, and he almost struck down the Emperor, and he ended up nearly killing his father and all that stuff. Like they were trying to show you all that exact same stuff, but then it opens up additional questions because these movies are so inconsistent with what the Force can and can't do, or a person's ability to do whatever. She stops a ship from getting away by simply holding it in place. Ben, then Kylo, whatever you want to call it, Kylo Ren then starts playing tug of war with the ship, suggesting he can do the exact same thing. He's equally powerful because neither of them can win, until she finally has enough, starts force lightning the ship and breaks the entire thing apart. But then we're meant to believe she just went and crawled into that other little ship real quick and flew off. Like, why didn't he just stop that one? He's like, have we not established that I've got the ability to stop ships from flying away? But he lets her go. I don't understand the inconsistency. You get Poe yelling, come on, we gotta go. And they're right there.
Yeah.
He could stop that ship just as easily as she stopped the one that was getting away, but he doesn't.
Yeah, the other thing I don't like about the Force being such a superpower in this movie is that it took away from the really critical conversation between Rey and Luke. Remember, this is not like a superpower. It's not something that you own. It's not something that you're supposed to harness at a level that creates supremacy, superiority. That's not what this is about.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of this took away from the humility of being Force sensitive. It got out of hand. It really did.
Yeah, it just came down to who has the most, who is the most powerful. There are two characters that I want to talk about because we've not really gotten a chance to talk about them at all in this trilogy, and I feel like one of them in particular is important for you. It's General Hux.
Yes, I've always liked General Hux. I was very disappointed when not only is he killed off in this film in a really cheap way, I think Admiral Pride, is he a general or an admiral? He's like a high supreme admiral, Pride or whatever.
Yeah, he's a thing.
So he clearly is, has a higher ranking than General Hux.
And he dates back to the old wars with Palpatine and the Empire.
So there's a lot of kind of disempowerment here with General Hux. He doesn't have the control that he used to have. I mean, he was essentially kind of stripped down to a side character, and then he made this bold move to save our heroes. He was the spy the whole time, which is also a little bit of a sloppy thing. In the beginning of the film, we learn there's a spy and there's information that's being carried across the sides. And I don't know, he just sort of comes across, for me at least, as like in this movie, a cheap writing twist.
I think he's cheap throughout all three movies, to be honest. And I think this is just my bias for redheads, but I don't think it's an accident that they chose to make him pale and sickly looking for three movies.
In the second movie, he was like a corpse.
Yeah. Like, they're going to make him weak. They're going to make him shriveling. and it's ultimately going to be because he's a redhead. But I also appreciated his reasoning for being the spy more maybe than you did.
Okay.
Because yes, it is cheap to suggest, again, you could have planted the seed last movie or 2 movies ago, but what it really came down to was the sibling rivalry of, look, I don't need to win the war. I just can't let him win the war.
Yeah.
Like I can't let him succeed. So
and
whether
where
you
this-
win or not is irrelevant to me.
Yeah. Where this makes sense is that he thrives on power,
Yeah.
as we saw in the first film.
And now that he's been stripped of it, he wants
Yeah.
to take everyone else down a notch. Specifically, Kylo Ren. He
Yeah.
needs Kylo Ren to fail. And that I did appreciate. I did appreciate that it wasn't some turncoat moment of, oh, you believe in us. So you've been with us the whole time.
Yeah.
And he just straight up says, I don't care if you win. I just need him to lose. Like that to me is a valuable moment. And again, while I don't think appreciate it as much as I do enjoy the fact that Pride is not an idiot. That he hears what is an obvious attempt to get out of any sort of accountability for the heroes having escaped by saying, well, they shot me, they took me over, and of course you're the spy. And Richard E. Grant, as Pride, just takes the blaster and shoots him. And he's like, I'm not an idiot. Tell Kylo Ren we found the spy. It's like, of course it's him. And so yeah, I do appreciate those little moments, but it is cheap. It is, you've got a character that was never fully fleshed out, was never really given an opportunity to be anyone of any note. The second movie is ridiculous. The whole, like, I'm holding for General Hux, just making him an idiot, and incompetent in the beginning. Meanwhile, he rose to a very prominent place within the First Order. I got to believe that he was competent to a degree, that the First Order basically came up out of nowhere during, their own rebellion against the New Republic. And he's now one of the leaders of the group.
Yeah.
And so I just can't believe that he's a complete idiot.
Talk about the comics for a moment. His father was a very high level
in the beginning, in the
person
origin
yes.
of the First Order,
Yeah.
which we see in The Mandalorian.
Yeah, there is a comic that covers some early experiences that he has, and there's some intergenerational trauma there too, because his father had a hard time. He really laid into
you've read this
him.
comic?
I've read parts of it. He really laid into his son. Was incredibly harsh and
Sure.
abusive, essentially raised him in a very stereotypical militant way.
Yeah.
So his son learned that to be valuable, you have to be powerful, you have to be destructive, you have to be Machiavellian, essentially. So he learned all the wrong things. I'm not excusing his behaviors as essentially a Nazi.
Yeah.
And he's pretty awful, especially in the first movie. He's horrified. He's basically behind genocide. So it's a weird movement for you to see that kind of character in the first movie and then see him kind of be
Just Weasley.
taken down in such a cheap way.
Yeah.
I mean, you almost maybe want it to be a little bit more fulfilling in terms of his death. Make him realize how horrible he was.
Oh, you want redemption out of this?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, they could have figured that out.
But as you pointed out, his father was someone of note. So really, by making Rey a Palpatine, the entire 9-movie arc, character after character, is really just about inherited privilege. It's just one character after another having kids who end up being powerful or, or not, whatever, because it's very possible that Hux isn't necessarily competent. He just got there through who his father is and all that stuff.
I agree with you, and I'd add unresolved trauma.
Yeah.
Because the privilege was not their choice.
Sure. Well, that's privilege.
They are born into having some internal and external access to power.
Yeah.
What was definitely the fault of the generations before them is that they didn't bother to resolve and reconcile their adversity.
Yeah. Okay. The other character I want to discuss for a moment, because again, we've not really talked about him at all, is Chewbacca. Chewbacca is the only true character to react to the major deaths of the original characters. I mean, the tear bursting moment that he screams, roars in anger and pain at the loss of his best friend in Force Awakens, and then does the exact same thing for Leia in this movie, where he goes to his knees, roaring.
Yeah,
over
it was the
loss.
only realistic reaction to one of our main characters dying.
Yeah, and then there's something about watching him run down the sand dune to go tell Rey it's time to go. That's so childlike in a way. Like, we've established that Wookiees basically are way older. He's like 250 years old. But he just has this childlike quality in those eyes.
Yeah, I see it as a sense of purpose because he's told, hey, go grab Rey. Rey has wandered off because she's listening to some voice in her head that tells her Kylo Ren is out there.
Trying to do a flip over a TIE fighter.
Yeah. And Chewie's told, hey, go retrieve her.
Yeah.
And he's so eager to be in that purpose that he's a part of this crew. He's a part of it. Really, this goes back in a weird way to 3PO telling the young cohort, like, he's looking at his friends for the last time before his memory is wiped. And you're just sitting there thinking,
these aren't your friends. You just met them a week ago.
Like, it's fair to say these are your companions for now.
Yeah.
But what a weird line. It would have made, it made us in the theaters feel emotional because
that's the thing, is it
we
was
were
for
looking
us.
We were looking at our friend.
Well, and he's looking at us too. Like, if I remember correctly, during that shot, he's facing the camera. So he's basically looking at the audience being like, just taking one last look at my friends. He's talking about us.
I was bawling watching that.
He's not talking about Poe. He's not talking about Finn. He's not talking about, R2's not even there. He's not talking about anyone of them. He's just talking to us.
Maybe for what do they call the translator droids? I forgot.
Like the protocols?
Yeah, exactly. The protocol droids. Maybe they have a mechanism where their visual sense switches back and he's just looking on an actual memory. He's not really looking at the people in front of him. And he's going through like a Rolodex, all of the memories he had with Luke and Leia and Chewbacca and R2. And that's what he's looking at.
So Poe is like, thanks 3PO. We're honored that you think of us. And he's like, no, I'm not talking about you.
He's like, be quiet. I'm going through my memory log.
I'm just going through my memory log.
I like this.
He's completely
revision.
blind. He can't even see them, but they're just like 3PO.
Yeah, because they had plugged him in already. So that's the story I'm going to go with.
Oh my God. That would be great. But then 3PO also ends up giving the ultimate sacrifice, or so he believes. He allows himself to die, essentially, like knowing that he'll come back, but he's not himself anymore. He doesn't have any of the memories or any of what had made him C-3PO.
That would be his second wipe.
Yeah, at least.
Mm-hmm.
but somehow he always managed to keep R2 in the memory. Like R2 was always going to be sort of his companion. But yeah. Who else? Anyone else that you're thinking we should touch on in the waning moments of our Star Wars franchise analysis?
Not necessarily, but myself, I am myself going through a little bit of a 3PO memory.
Are you?
Flashback, where I'm looking on all of my friends and appreciating being a part of their journey.
I couldn't help but notice you were staring at me when you said that, but I now know that behind your eyes,
I'm not
you were
looking
actually,
at you.
You were actually.
I'm looking upon all the memories of the last, 40 or so years of Star Wars.
But you know what? Once this blast door closes, a brand new experience will happen, and that will begin next time when we talk about Star Trek, the motion picture. And for those listening and going, they're going to watch before the next episode and follow along with us. I should note that we are going to talk about the director's cut because I've still never seen that one. Just recently redone in 4K and is supposed to be amazing. I have not seen the director's cut. So we'll talk about that on our next episode where we join Captain Kirk and the crew of the Enterprise.
I'm going to need a lot of coffee, a lot of...
Only for this first movie.
Chocolate, a lot of cocaine, meth. What else do I need? I feel like
to stay awake during
it just
the motion
seems,
picture?
I'm just going to be honest. I'm not sure that I have the expectation that it's going to be like super adventurous and lively.
So the first movie does get ragged on for good reason. And I'll explain why in that episode.
Okay.
But it does take on the moniker of the unmotion picture, because it's not for you. I will be very interested to watch it with you because it is hard sci-fi. I mean, that's
my jam.
Yeah. It's not flying around, shooting each other with phasers. A lot of the time it is very science driven. And I will be interested to watch it with you. But really, two is where it is. Wrath of Khan. That's where the excitement will come in. Until then, Drea, I feel like we need to let our listeners know that we will be appearing at Comic-Con Revolution in Ontario, California, on May 20th. Right? Mm-hmm. We will have a panel.
That's right. So our panel is Saturday, May 20th from 1 to 1:50 in room 200 ABC. And we'll be talking about the healing power of stories in general. So we'll be covering Star Wars, Batman, Marvel, many of the things that we've already covered on the show. But we'll have kind of like a Q&A, and it'll be super fun.
Excited to do that. Always enjoy seeing folks out and about in person. And until then, in the next episode, Drea, why don't you tell the good folks where they can find you online?
You can find me on social media at Arkham Asylum Doc or my website, drdreapsychology.com, where you can leave us a voice message.
And you're going to want to leave those voice messages because soon Drea and I will be unveiling something that I think will reward you for your best thoughts and questions for each episode. But we'll wait to tell you what that is until the time comes. You can find me online. I am at bward028 on Twitter. I am at b_ward028 on Instagram. You can find us both on Twitter at Arkham Sessions and on Instagram at The Arkham Sessions. You can also find us on Facebook and on Discord, which we've talked about in the past. And I want to thank some of our patrons for making this episode possible. Dr. Jerome Anderson, Antonio Lopez, Candy B, Kevin Ortel, Hero's Journey Fitness, Todd Stashwick, Mark Pepper, Frank Mueller, Emily Higgins, Swara Salih, Carl Ward, Michael Pruitt, Eric O'Sullivan, Rachel Acevedo Hoffman, Zach Neal, Ruben Gonzalez, Dr. Girlfriend, and John Henry. Thank you all so much for your help and your support. Without you, we couldn't possibly keep these episodes going. So we want to thank you. Also, be sure to follow our family over at Fanbase Press. And until next time, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Drea Letamendi.
And together we are
The Arkham Sessions.
What are you doing there, 3PO?
Taking one last look, sir, at my friends.